Kevin. All right. All right. Can everybody hear me okay? This new microphone's awesome. Okay. So I'm Kevin Stierhoff. I've been with the group since about January 2020, December 2021, I think I joined. And just started getting turning then. Really enjoyed the group, started becoming part of the AV team, the demo committee, and we got behind the 8 ball a little bit and didn't have presenters. So I also became the demo leader for this month, and we polled for some ideas, and I think it was Wells actually who said turning a carving mallet be a good idea. And coincidentally, I had turned one not that long before he suggested it, so I knew I could do it. Since then, I've been trying to hone my skills, so to speak, with some spindle tools. Originally, I thought this might be how to turn a mallet solely with a skew. Could have done that, but I also thought since this group seems to be a little bit focused on bolt turning, myself included, that I would try to demo some of the other tools, some spindle gouges and roughing gouges and things like that. So hopefully try to show a few different ways of doing spindle work to create a mallet. The picture that you see on the screen is the one that I turned start to finish in practicing for this. That was the second one I turned. And then this last week, I pulled out some scrap pieces of Doug fir, and I'll show those around too, to just kind of practice some different things and practice intentional catches and things like that, and figure out what was going on principally with the skew. But anyway, Dan, you want to go ahead to the next slide? I just got a couple slides. I'd like to focus more on the turning part. I think that's probably more fun. Did it go, Dan?
Locked up.
Awesome.
Are you selecting on the?
Hang on just a sec.
Oh,
right. I didn't expect you to read this large quote, but when I came up with the design for this, I just kind of went out looking. I figured I wasn't going to create it entirely from scratch. I looked at some of the ones that were commercially available out there and took some dimensions from those. And the large quote is the description from the website, just kind of talking about some of the principles of a carving mallet, what makes a good carving mallet. It should be comfortable, feel light in your hand. Of course, there are things blocking some of it, so I can't read. Useful for chisel work, should be comfortable, somewhat lightweight, but dense enough to transfer the force of your blow down through the chisel and into the wood. They're made out of a lot of different things. I've seen some that are synthetic, made out of some sort of polyurethane or whatever, but a lot of them that you find are these Narex style chisels and things like that. This particular one's made out of European beech. And for $30 or $40, you can go to Amazon and get yourself one. And but that wouldn't be much fun. I kind of regretted not actually buying one, just to get it to compare with the ones that we're making here and see how they hold up. But surely this group would prefer to make one themselves. And so that was the intent of this. And then Ro reached out and said that he likes to use these mallets when he's pounding red hot steel. That way he can straighten things out without damaging the textures that he had made previously in his blacksmithing work. So, and then when you're contacting the wood quickly, the heat has a minimal impact on your mallet, becomes effective that way. And once you damage it, then you just turn yourself a new one. That's it.
Hey, oh, no, the
Yeah.
contact is so instantaneous, it's not on the heat long enough to do damage. I also use a rolled up leather mallet, not on rawhide, yeah, and I've been using that one for years.
So many of the ones that I saw in terms of dimensions were about 10 inches in length. I'll pass these around. About 10 inches in length overall, about 2.5 inches in diameter, and about a half a pound or 250 grams. This particular one's made out of black acacia, which is more dense than beech. So it actually comes in around 450 grams. So it's kind of in the middle. The first one that I made was this one. I spent quite a bit of time on it, making it fit my hand. It's a little more ergonomic, perhaps. But this one weighs about 750 pounds. So this is for more heavy duty work. In the end, the dimensions are similar to the larger ones that you can get online. But the fact that it's made out of black acacia, it's a lot heavier. You could do some things probably to reduce the weight of it.
What's the angle that you turn them on? Is that a fixed or you're going?
It's variable. No, I don't know. And I'm sure there's some science to that, right? So when your hand is going, you want it to contact the chisel or whatever you're hitting at a certain angle that's comfortable. If you go online, Kirk DeHere, who demoed last month, has a video on turning a carving mallet with skew chisel mostly. His is not tapered. His is square, top to bottom. It's about as big around as that one and similar in shape and size. So
And you always make them out of one piece. You don't like have heavy wood and then a cheaper piece here instead of wasting a lot of lignin.
not yet. These are scrap pieces of black acacia that I think I made some available to the club a while back and had been sitting around for a while and it started to end check and things like that. So when folks went out to get them, that wasn't as desirable as it was when I first cut some pieces, but this was a couple scraps I had lying around from that process that weren't quite good enough for bowls. So I put them on the bandsaw and cut them down into something that would be more of a spindle blank. And the difference between these two, the one that Bill has in his hand, that one is a piece of rift sawn or quarter sawn. The larger one is actually a whole limb that I turned. So the pith's included in the center. Got a little bit of cracking to it, but I've found the black acacia to be really stable anyway. Doesn't tend to crack, and if it does, it doesn't tend to propagate too badly. But in the end of the day, it's a mallet, and I've already scuffed it up, and it doesn't really matter. But it was. Thank you. I got to admit, I did modify the design. It was quite suggestive when I first did it. The end was sort of rounded on the handle, and I went and sort of chopped it off. I sent the picture to some friends, and they started laughing about the shape of it. So I figured I'd make it a little more G-rated than it was. So next slide, Dan. So when picking out wood for making these sorts of things, I think probably the biggest consideration next to availability is the Jenka hardness, and that's the resistance to denting. And if you go online and search for Jenka hardness stuff, a lot of what you'll see are flooring companies that show a list of all the different flooring materials that they have, and dent resistance. And obviously, you don't want your floor to be made out of something that's super soft, like at the bottom of that list, Eastern white pine. You would damage it to death. At the top of that scale is, I think, Ipe in this case, which is like a Brazilian hardwood, which is super hard. And those numbers are related to the amount of force that it's required to drive a steel sphere halfway into a board, which is sort of that cartoon that's indicated in the center. And so that's the Jenka test, Jenka hardness test. On the left, black acacia is what I'll be demoing today, is if everything goes well. I've got some backups of Douglas fir in case things go sideways. Some of the species that we have available, like Clare walnut and white ash, tan oak, are reasonably good in terms of dent resistance. Press over that one. Stop press the button, Stan. I don't recall. Beech is not on this list, but I think beech is kind of in the center of that scale, maybe a little bit less. So the black acacia, the walnuts, and things like that are a little harder, a little less dent resistant than, or a little more dent resistant than the beech and the commercially available ones. Some surprising ones, and I got to credit Wells for pulling out these values and sharing with me on email. It made my job a little bit easier. Live oak was 2680, quite a lot harder than most of the woods that we've got around. We're not sure if that's the coast live oak that we have here. I tried to look it up by the scientific name, but it didn't show up in the database, which is linked at the bottom. If you guys are curious to check out some of this, do some of this research yourself. The wood database is a great resource that has all sorts of information about wood, not just Jenka hardness, but density and background and ecology and all that stuff. Tell you which ones are endangered, hard to find, which ones are easier to get, things like that. Things about, I think we talked about sanding and toxicity. It's got information about that sort of stuff too, and allergic reactions. So did you have something, Justin?
A whole lot to do with the weight of the wood. It's like black acacia is way heavier than
Right.
black locust or madrone,
Right.
but doesn't seem to be as hard.
Right. Yeah.
At least, unlike ebony, which is dead salmon hard.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the black acacia is quite heavy, quite dense, but also not terribly dent resistant. I think if you feel it, it's got some scuffs on the surface, and I haven't used it much, but I have one chisel that I had hit with a metal hammer at one point, and so it was kind of scuffed up on the back. And so when I went at it with my mallet, it put some nice dents in my brand new mallet, and I was a little sad for a minute, but I got over it.
No,
Sure.
there's a couple of them that they're stable. They may or may not be heavy, they're really hard.
Mhm.
And maybe it's my imagination, but like winging.
Mhm.
It's super hard, but man, it'll splinter off.
Mhm.
It's nasty.
And I think I've heard people describe the black acacia as being fibrous, and maybe that's sort of that characteristic that you're describing.
You know, I've used African black wood for projects and I don't see it on the list. I thought it was really dense.
It's really expensive.
Yeah, but I think if you're looking at the wood database, black acacia doesn't show up necessarily, but it's usually Australian blackwood, I think is what they call it. And it's imported, introduced from there.
I mean, it's very expensive. What a great wood that would be for a melon.
It's very heavy, but it splinters easily.
It's like,
It does. That's my experience.
I've got a really large piece of blue gum eucalyptus that I haven't known what to do with, and Wells points out that the density of that one and the Jenka hardness is actually quite high. So I think I might have found a use to chop that up into some spindle blanks and perhaps make some mallets out of it. It seems like it would turn nicely. It seems to have a good feel to it. But it moves and it cracks really badly. So for bowls and things like that, it's a little tough, I think, to work with. I've been told anyway. And then at the top of the scale is lignum vitae at 4390. So that's off the top of the chart on the right hand side. And then the little inset image there, I think is that actually made out of lignum vitae? That's one of Martin's larger pieces of a carving mallet and a chisel there. Shared that with me.
There's a desert iron with it too.
Oh.
Desert iron that long.
Well, yeah, quite a bit, because it's sitting on my finger. So,
So Roy, the desert ironwood is up there in the scale too?
Heavy, very tough.
Gotcha. That's off of that slide. I couldn't resist this picture. This came across my social media the other day. This is a up and rising new baseball star, Ellie De La Cruz for the Cincinnati Reds, and the image down there shows the difference in Jenka hardness of a baseball and a piece of ash, which I imagine that bat's made out of, but it's sort of the opposite image of the one that's on the right. Ball's the one that's being deformed and not the wood. So the bat, I imagine, is probably flexing a little bit, but not denting, perhaps a little bit. That's all. So for this particular project, these are the dimensions. The blank that I've got is, I'll switch over to that view after this is done. I've got about a 12-inch black acacia blank 3x3, and then I'll break it down into two parts, the handle and the head, about 4.5 inches each. We've got a 1-inch bead on the end, 2.5 inches wide, perhaps a little bit wider. The blank I've got's a little bit bigger. No point in just turning all that diameter into shavings, so maybe we'll make one that's a little bit bigger. Today, I'll start by roughing out the blank, probably with a spindle gouge, perhaps demonstrating how to do some rough work with a skew, if I'm brave. We'll lay out the different parts, dimension the parts with calipers and parting tools and things like that. Refine those cuts with a skew and spindle gouges and whatnot, refine the shape, turn the details, the coves, the beads. Those mallets that I passed around have some burn lines on them. I figured we'd do that quick just to add a little character to them. And I think that's it. That might be the last slide. Just a list of the tools I've got, and I'll introduce them as I use them, but it's a large spindle roughing gouge, a radius grinded skew chisel on the large end, 2 spindle gouges, a 1/2 inch and 3/8, a diamond and an arrow, diamond parting tool and arrow parting tool, 2 different ones. I picked up a safety drive center, and I'll wait to talk about a lot of these till I get on camera so Tom can see. But it doesn't have the spur drives on. It's actually just a conical shape with a spring-loaded center And the amount of force that you get is determined based on how much pressure you put on the tailstock. So it shoves it in and it gives it a friction fit. And it's really good for people that are learning how to use things like a skew chisel. You can back off the tension a little bit, and if you get a catch, it's not like you're running a big spur drive on a Powermatic lathe and you're going to have stuff come flying off. It'll stop the wood. And so it's good for beginning turners. It's good for turning with kids. And I've got a 9-year-old daughter, so it seemed like a good investment to pick something like that up. So I can start teaching her on a proper lathe, cone center, and outside dividers and calipers. I think that's it. Probably the last slide. So let me help Dan turn off the PowerPoint. Stop sharing. Okay. How do we get it? That should be it.
Okay.
How do we get that to go?
You probably. Yeah. That's good.
So Tom, are you seeing the full screen of the lathe right now? Hopefully.
Yes, I am, Kevin. Full screen.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank them. Dan, you're seeing me over here, okay?
Make our small screen up.
I think if you, in the 3 dots in the upper corner,
Yeah.
I think we can pin it.
Gallery.
Speaker.
There we go.
Thank you.
Should be here. Everybody. Or someone needs to do it. I can do it.
All right, so
Sure, it's lockable, yeah.
Whatever that is.
Should kind of fold it. Oh. It is. Big there.
So this is the blank that I've got to work with. This is the same piece of black acacia, or the same from the same tree as the one I passed around earlier. Like I said, this one's actually about 3.5 square. And just a little bit over 12 inches long. And Dan, maybe come over top. I can show this. This is the safety drive center I was describing. It's spring loaded in the center. It's just got a smooth face on it. So that gets mounted in the headstock, and then just use I think it's a 60-degree live center in the tailstock. And I've heard lots of people talk about moving this out of the way so you don't get whacked in the elbow and get the mark of the turner. And so far I've avoided that, but this morning when I was setting things up, I quickly reached through and the thing was in there, and so I got officially a turner now. I think it's finally stopped bleeding, which is good. So we've got our drive center there, cone center here. I'll go ahead and get this mounted in the lathe. A couple ways you can find center, and I've found it useful to watch people do it different ways and demonstrate different ways. I guess when you're Richard Raffin or Kirk to here, you just kind of eyeball it. I'm not that good. So I'll go corner to corner on this one. Most people could probably figure this part out. So there's my center on that end. I use my punch to get a starting point. The other way I've seen it done, actually works quite well, is to draw a smaller square in the center of the blank by using your fingers sort of as a marking gauge, go around all 4 sides. Then you've got a smaller square in the center, and that is a little bit easier to find center of than the whole big square. So since we're doing spindle work and not bolt work, it's not as critical. It's going to turn around eventually anyway. I hadn't looked too carefully at this before I brought it. This is actually also from a log. So you see the center pith is here. So this may not be the best mallet in the end. We'll find out. It'll turn just fine. I don't know if it has a better side, one side or the other. So I'm going to pick the slightly larger end and make that the head of the mallet. This lathe is identical to mine, but slightly different. All right, so right now it'll spin free in the headstock, but as I add a little tension, you'll see it comes to a stop, but it'll still spin a little bit. Let's see what I want to demonstrate here. So since I'm feeling pretty good this morning, I'm going to go ahead and add some tension. We can increase it if it starts to spin on me. But now it's in there. Looks like it's pretty well centered. I'm going to start with the spindle roughing gouge. As I described, I think this one's about 1.25 inches, perhaps. The first set of tools I bought was a 6-piece or 8-piece Craftsman set, had a couple little tiny roughing gouges in there, and they don't work terribly well compared to this. This is one of the best investments I made for spindle turning, was to pick up this large roughing gouge. You'll see it really makes quick work of knocking the corners off of these blanks and getting it down to something that's mostly round or totally round. And then based on how you hold the tool, you can actually treat it a little bit like a skew and actually get a nice finish. If you hold it at an angle and attack the wood rather than just coming straight at it with the nose, or a little bit, turn it around and use the side wing to get a pretty nice finish and remove a lot of material quickly. This particular lathe has 3 different settings on the pulleys. Since this is spindle work, we're going to be working a little bit faster, probably about the 2,000 to 2,500 RPM range. So this one's set up on the smallest pulley on the top and the larger on the bottom. And according to this, that'll get you 1,300 to 3,850 in terms of RPMs. Before I turn anything on, I'm going to put my face shield on. Hopefully folks can you still hear me okay? Ooh, it looked like we. Dan, you can turn down the gain on this guy a little bit. If you close the laptop screen a little bit, I think this is channel 1. And you can turn that knob down a little bit to
For that,
that's probably better. Is that better?
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So we're spinning clear the tool rest. The tool rest is just about, it's a little low. I want to bring it up to so that the tool's cutting on the center axis of the lathe and spin free. I've got the speed turned way down since this is the first time we've checked this guy up. I brought the tailstock in, got a little bit of tension on the quill to keep it from vibrating. A little bit of vibration there because it's a little bit out of true, perhaps a little bit off center. It's about 1,100 RPMs right now. It's going to be interesting because this lathe's a little bit high. I'm used to ones, I think everybody's used to one that's a little bit lower than this. But we'll adapt. Okay, still hear me? So if you start with the roughing gouge, and in spindle work, you don't want to work large to small. So I'm going to start in the center, work my way to the end. And since this is a relatively short tool rest, I'll start one side, go down, and then work from the center back in the other direction. Importantly, when you're doing this stuff, a lot of times most times you get in trouble, you get a catch is when you have the tool engage the wood and you don't have the tool on the tool rest yet. So you'll see folks talk about the ABCs, anchor, which means getting the tool on the tool rest, bevel, which means finding the bevel before you find the edge, and then finally cut. So get the tool on the tool rest. You hear the bevel rubbing, but not cutting anything. And Dan looks like he's got a good view from up above. Slowly bringing the tool down. We'll start to see some shadowing. Get it wrapped at the moment. With this. Try to have good practices here and not move the tool rest while the lathe is going. Do whatever you want at home, I guess. There you go. Took a little bit too much wood. Don't have enough tension on the drive center, so I had a little bit of tension. Closer, but take some of these big ends off and then hopefully maybe take some of the vibration out by getting it a little bit more true. And I don't know if you can see the finish on this, but it's obviously pretty rough at this point. And we still got lots of flats. We're a little more aggressive for the sake of time, and I know we'll slow down. The wood's compressing a little bit probably, so increase the tension a little bit over time. Also, now that it's a little more true, I was only cutting at about 1250. Still getting some vibration there. But cuts a lot better the faster you go. Good point. Now I'm picking off all the big corners, but if you rub your tool up there, you can see it's still got lots of flats and still a lot of vibration. I can't hear much in here, so if anybody's got any questions, feel free to stop me, stick your hand up, I'll try to peek up. While I'm looking at it, has anybody got any questions? Not yet. So now that I've got the corners taken off, I can bring the tool rest back in a little bit too. Get a little closer to the work. Raise up the tool rest a little bit too. But now I think we should be able to go a little bit faster. Still some flat spots. On that side, still a little bit flat. Do one more pass and then switch to the other side. That seems pretty good. That's good enough for layout. We'll do some more refining. We won't spend time getting this perfect. There's just one little flat spot there, but that's not a bad surface, and we're down to round. So I'm gonna put this guy away. I think well, for the moment anyway. So let's see, what did we end up with for we volunteered to do cleanup. A lot of shavings back here. Right now we're at about 3.5 inches still, so that's I don't remember. Dan, can you pass me that larger mallet? I'm just curious for how it compares for scale. I think this one's closer to 4. Yeah. I'll be somewhere in between. And here, I'm gonna try to duplicate this one, so to an extent.
We always have the amount of paint, this at the tail end or at the head end of the lake, or do you, which way around do you do it?
First time I did it, I think it naturally made sense to me to have it on the left. And I figured having more mass on the drive center side would probably be advantageous for one reason or another. And I think that's worked out well for me. You can turn it either way. I think maybe Kirk does his the opposite way. And in fact, I think partway through his demo, I think he flips it around to be able to get, better access to the handle one way or the other. Because when I started doing the skew work, I found that I tend to cut a lot better in one direction than in the other. I'm not ambidextrous. I can turn left-handed a little bit, but I prefer to keep it in my right-handed and kind of turn it around and go the other direction. But I get a cleaner cut going to the left than I do to the right. So for reasons like that, you might choose to put it one direction or the other. Let's see. Make it a little bit easier to see. I'll use the Sharpie. So these guys are both about 10 inches long, I think. Yeah. And the blank's a little over 12. So I'll leave some space on the 2 ends. And so when you make that, oh, that's 9. I guess I can't do math today. So that's going to be waste material on this end. This is going to go away. There's going to be waste material on the head mallet, the mallet head side. I'm going to leave about 1 inch on this end for the bead at the end of the handle. And then that gives us 9 inches in between the bead and the head. And I just split that in half at 4.5 and 4.5. So that'll be the top of the head and bottom of the head. That's going to be waste. That'll be the bead. And we're not looking at that one. So the first thing I'll do is take the skew and turn down the ends a little bit, kind of define the 2 ends, and probably do a little V-cut to denote where the handle starts and the head of it ends. The tool rest is the same height for now, which is a little bit above center, just barely. A lot of the videos I've watched suggest that if you're new to the skew and you're getting familiar with it, having the tool rest just a little bit above center is a little more forgiving, perhaps a little less likely to get a catch. And since I'm new, I've kind of followed that blindly. We'll maybe move it down. So this is the skew chisel that I've got. I sharpened all the tools before I came. I brought the grinder because the skew needs to be quite sharp, and the black acacia can be a little tough on tools. So I don't want to spend a lot of time grinding, but if the cuts get bad, then I'll step over and do that. We talk a little bit about grinding too. This is I think it's a 1-inch skew. There's a lot of different grinds. There's a lot of different configurations and bar shapes. There's oval ones, which are seem interesting, but I've heard a lot of bad feedback about them just in terms of how they behave. I watched a fair amount of skew videos before I started buying these tools, and a lot of folks recommended getting one that had a radius grind. I mean, you can reshape these yourself, but this one came with a grind shape like this on the tip, which is slightly radiused, and we can talk a little bit more about the reason that I like this or other potential shapes and what the curved shape of it what benefits it might provide compared to some that are just ground straight across. This one has rounded edges, which makes it nice when you're doing your planing cuts to be able to get it up on its edge. It slides nicely across the tool rest. versus ones that are completely square on the edges. A lot of times they'll say if you have one that's square on the edges, take a file and knock those corners down a little bit just to make it a little easier to rotate that. It's less likely to put big gouges in your tool rest. If you get a catch and it comes down, it's just a little bit easier on that. I'll probably do a couple different cuts with this. The first is going to be a peeling cut, which has the tool coming in from up above. Once it starts to engage, you're cutting down towards center. You're cutting straight across, and it's a good way for removing a lot of material all at once, but it doesn't necessarily give you a good finish. It's sort of like using a parting tool if you've done that before. You're not going to get clean cuts on the end grain, and you're not going to get clean cuts on the surface. You want to go back later, and we'll do that to do some planing cuts with the edge of the chisel. That'll actually give you some really refined surfaces. We're not going to do any sanding today, but I hope we don't have to. I'll pass around these two Doug fir versions. Neither of these have seen sandpaper. And Doug fir can be a little bit soft to work with and whatnot and tear out. And you'll see some, I intentionally left the mistakes on those. And I didn't sand them, so they're just how they came off my lathe. But you'll notice that you can get some good finishes on those without needing sandpaper. And at the end of the day, it's a turning mallet, it's a carving mallet, so probably don't need to sand it anyway. All right, so let's turn down these ends just to get the material out of the way. So I'm coming in with the tool a little bit high, anchor. You get your bevel, you kind of hang out while you're riding the bevel. And then as you pull it back and raise the handle a little bit, we'll start to see some dust on the tip. So now you're cutting. The way the tool handle, push it pull in. We're getting it down out of the row. With the V cuts just to find this end. And you see everything like that, we're actually starting to scrape. And so you want to kind of come at it a little bit higher. That tends to be tougher on your tools too, I understand, when you're scraping versus peeling, your edge will last a lot longer with your peeling versus scraping. And right now, I think my tool rest is a little high, so the peeling cuts aren't working quite as well as perhaps, so should going to drop it down just a little bit. Then one of the dimensions I didn't note was the handle diameter. So I'm going to take the handle down to 1.25 inches. That'd be the maximum diameter at the bead at the end, and also where the handle meets the hood, and also the center of the handle. That'd be the max dimension. So I'm using my outside calipers. I'm looking a little bit more than 1.25 inches. We can work down. So this is all sort of rough to start anyway, so we don't need to spend too much time on that. I'm going to move down to the other end. Oh. Perhaps a good time to talk about skew chisel anatomy. You'll hear this referred to as the toe, or the long point, the heel, the short point. I'm just using the long point or the toe to cut some V-grooves coming straight in at first. alternating sides, to create a little space in there. It's just defining it, and then I'm just gonna. That's good enough for now. So I mentioned that you don't get very good finish. I'm not sure what you're seeing here. We got the boom view. We got some really bad tear out, some end grain tearing out on this, but we can use the point of the skew chisel or a spindle gouge later on to get a clean cut across that face and get rid of all those torn fibers. Now I could, and I guess I'll try it. I'll show you perhaps a difference in speed. We want to next take this handle down to 1.25 inches all the way down. And you can do it with the skew. I don't think I'm skilled enough to do the really rough, removing a lot of material with a skew, but I'll try it. This might be my first catch. We'll see. But this is a planing cut versus the peeling cut I was doing before. So I don't, sometimes I lose track of my tools and things get exciting. Rather than coming square at the material like I did with the peeling cut, you're gonna raise up the toe into the chisel a little bit. You can imagine putting a little wedge in underneath of that to create a little bit of an angle. And I was watching a video by a guy named Brian Havens recently, who's got some really good skew chisel videos. I think he's actually a Bay Area guy too. And he was saying he didn't feel like the angle of the grind had as much to do with the catches as the angle that you're presenting the material to the wood. And so as long as you were coming at it sort of 45 degrees to the piece, you're less likely to get a catch. And so in this case, I'm going to have my handle turned over a little bit to get the angle of the cutting edge to about 45 degrees to the piece. I'm going to have it the heel end sitting on the tool rest, and then have this end up a little bit. We're going to want to try to be cutting on like the lower third, not quite all the way down to the heel, but part way up. But you're more like the closer you get to either end, you're going to start getting your catches. So see how this goes. I feel like my tool rest is a little low. So now I'm a little bit above center again. So, and you kind of get a feel for this stuff. It just kind of feels right. You look at it and like that seems low. Just gets a little awkward. So again, riding the bevel, not getting any dust. Starting to burnish the wood a little bit. Now starting to see the dust starting to form. You're cutting. And you can see I'm not very efficient at that. It's taken quite a while, but the surface on this is actually really clean when you're doing the planing cuts that way. So I'm going to switch back to the roughing gouge and turn this whole part down to the diameter of that end piece there. So it still feels pretty sharp. Now with the roughing gouge, I feel like the tourist needs to come down a little bit. Don't often get catch with the roughing gouge. I'm trying to, can't see back here. I'm like straddling this large leg from the lady, so my body was kind of in a weird position. That's my excuse. Good with him. But it's a lot less nerve-wracking when it catches with the safety center. Yeah, most of the way there. Switch back to the stool. And I'll stay a little bit away from the finished surface, so I'm going to do a peeling cut to get down to. So I'm getting kind of far away from the work with this smaller tourist. I can now get in a little bit closer, which is good. This is where you can treat your roughing gouge. At least I can feel like I can. Like a screw chisel, where you can come over on this far edge of the chisel and present it to the whip a little bit more like that to sort of get into this corner a little bit better. And I'll be honest, it feels a little dicey, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to get into the corner there and get a nasty catch. I'll just finish this out very quickly with a. All right, so we're kind of down to pretty close to 1.25 inches. I'm happy with that. For the handle. I think the next thing that we'll do is finish off the head. So we'll start up here on the top and clean up that face a little bit by doing some cuts with the point down the face, cutting the end fibers as we go down. I'm probably not going to finish this one today and take it all the way off the lathe. I'll probably leave these ends on in case I want to finish it up later, or if somebody else wants to take it home and finish it. Probably do that too. But now that we're down to diameter, and since I got tourist in here, I'll go ahead and mark where the so 4.5 for the handle and 5.5 for that. And you can, the nice thing about making your own mallet is you can make it to fit your own hand. You know, I found myself when I was making that one a lot of times just grabbing it as I went along and like, does that seem right? Does it need to be a little bit bigger? I've got relatively large hands, I guess. So my mallet might not be the best size for other people, but it is. Any questions? You good?
Narration is good.
All those nights of staying up late watching YouTube videos is paying off. So if you're interested in learning the cuts from someone who knows a lot more about this than I do, Alan Batty has a really nice older video where he talks about, he'll describe it better than I can. I'll try to do him some justice about, you know, how to present the tool to do these face cuts. But when you're coming in with a point, you're essentially, if you come in straight at it like this, it's going to want to, as you cut, it's going to want to push off the wood and drive you away from the direction that you're traveling. So when you're coming in, you want to bring the tool handle around so that the cutting edge is parallel to the surface that you want to cut. That'll allow you to go straight in. And then you want to tilt it over just a little bit. Trying to think of how he describes it. It's like just a little bit before midnight. So your tool's not straight up and down, which allows you to ride the bevel with the toe, but not get a catch farther back. And so you're swinging your tool handle around a little bit, coming in high, working down low, and sort of once you get the initial cut at the top, then you can rotate around and get on the bevel, and it'll help you ride down. If you don't do that, and I'll probably demonstrate this accidentally later, you'll get a catch, and you'll probably get a skate or a spiral, and you'll cut back. And I think some of those Doug fir mallets have a couple examples of that unintentional skating going on. You can't take a lot of material when we're doing this. It's got to be a pretty light cut for the most part. That's pretty clean. A little bit of bashing there. I don't think that's actually torn grain. That's just where the pool rubbing perhaps has a little heavier on the bevel in that spot. This has got a little bit of a curve to it, and that seems to be comfortable against my hand, so I'll leave that. On the other end, I'll actually undercut it a little bit. The larger mallet that I made, I did a better job of that because I think I used a spindle gouge. But when you set it down, it doesn't rock. This one, I wish I had done a little better job of making it undercut because it rocks a little bit. And then once I turned off all the pieces, then it was a little bit hard a lot of material to take out any other way. So I just left that one the way it was. Let's clean up that first. So that's a good example. I was a little bit too far over. I was rubbing pretty high up on the bevel. And so I wasn't able to get into the cut and start driving it down. So I think I need to move my body around a little bit. It's a little bit hard to see. I'll try. Spy catch. This looks pretty good, but it's still domed a little bit, and it also doesn't seem like it's cutting quite as well. So I'm going to see just quickly if I can touch this on the grinder. Sorry, I can't show the grinder very well, but So I didn't spend as much time setting up my grinder platform as I should have, so I've added a nice little secondary facet to my my skew chisel. I think the skew is probably more sensitive to being sharp than a lot of the other tools. So somebody that's better with a skew than me could probably undercut that with a skew, but I can't. So I'm going to switch to the spindle gouge. This is the 1/2 inch spindle gouge with a fingernail grind. And this one should be a little bit better at getting down on that face. So come along with the flute closed. We're gonna like that, so I can turn the. Hello. So I wasn't on the bevel there before I touched the wood. Wasn't on the bevel again. And if you hold that across, it's a little bit undercut. I think I'd like to go just a little bit more. I won't spend too much time trying to make the perfect mallet. And then I'll. All right, so it's undercut enough, I think. And it's gonna pretty clean surface. I run it up here. I'm just gonna put a really quick little chamfer on it in just to, I think it looks nice. And then, as Mike brought up earlier, we're gonna taper this down a little bit. I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to what it is, but it's a good opportunity to practice some planing cuts with the skew chisels. I'm gonna switch back to it. Oh, yeah.
My imagination, or is it just awkward to have it so high?
I have the lathe so high. It's incredibly awkward. Yeah. If I make any mistakes, it's because the lathe's too high. Yeah, I mean, I think I set mine up, a lot of people do, so that it just kind of sits with your elbow naturally bent like that. So, you know, we're working up pretty high. It kind of throws things off a little bit. I should have practiced with a higher lathe this week. Or we could just build a little platform to raise folks up a little bit. Yep. Yep, I could. That would be weird to turn sitting down. I don't think I've tried that yet, but. Oh,
One way, sitting.
was it? Interesting. Never thought to try that. I sit down all day. I don't want to sit down in front of my lathe. All right, so I'm going to start on this end and just start taking off a little bit, working my way back. I'll try to keep this diameter the same here, and maybe, I don't know, bring it down 1/4 inch or something like that. Maybe I'll make a little line. as a reference for myself. Well, yeah, that's easy to see. Turn this away later. That's a camera view. That's pretty good, huh? All right. Everybody always asks, this is a 2150 RPMs. In case anybody's curious. Those are gonna be my pouring pets. It's silent pets, I'm sorry. I don't know if that vibration is because the tool's a little bit dull. The wood's tough to cut, both. I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't normally have my arm up here, but it feels comfortable right now, so. So there was, I engaged the heel without being on the bevel. And that's what a nice catch, spiral catch looks like. Oh, I forgot. We still got, I said it wasn't important to take it down. I still got some raw chainsaw marks, essentially is what that is. So let's take it down a little bit further. Get rid of that. For the sake of time, I'm gonna do this. Not a bad taper. Pretty straight. Got rid of the chainsaw marks that were on there. And that's actually not too bad of a surface. Just coming off of the roughing gouge. Still got some remnants of that catch on the chamfer, so I'll clean that up before I finish. But I'll switch back to this view and try to do one last planing cut to clean up that surface so don't have to sand it. Not that I was going to do that anyway. Those are mostly burnish marks. That's not. I thought the one right past to get. I was riding the bevel a little hard there, I guess, and burnish the wood instead of cut it. Okay, that good just for the sake of this demonstration. While I'm up here and I've got my skewer in my hand, I'm gonna put a couple of V cuts in for making the burn lines later. Doesn't really matter where you put these things. Since I've got, yeah, I use a different tool. This is a spindle, detail spindle I have, so it's a little more of a shallower flute, I think, a more exaggerated tip. And a fingernail grind. I just got a couple of quick little V grooves in here for the burning wire. Touch down with a earlier on that one. That one you touched, I tore out some of the grain there. That's unfortunate. It's gonna bother me. There. Right, so that's good. I'm down to my line on this end, so it seems like a good picture. So the way I did some of those is to leave like a little fillet, a little flat spot up here near the tap of the handle. Do that again. This is gonna be the end of the handle. That's just sort of creating some clearance for my spindle guides when I go to turn that bead on the end. Okay, here. All right, so that kind of defines the boundaries for the different shapes I'm going to turn next. And then, let's see. So I'm going to take it down. It'll be about 1.25 inches in the center, and then it'll go down to about 1 inch on either end. So I'll take about 1/4 inch of dimension. That'll create the curved shape of the handle. So I'm going to adjust my calipers to be 1 inch. Take a drink of water too. That's 1 inch. And I marked the center. So this handle is pretty much going to be just like a really exaggerated bead. So the center is going to be about 2 1/4 here. And I'll mark that so that I don't touch that area. So that's going to be the highest point. And if you work on either side of that, then you won't reduce the dimension of your bead. And some folks like to kind of make instead of just one line, and make it a little fuzzy. And then I'm going to use the parting tool full of wood shavings. The diamond parting tool which is this guy here, one of the quintessential mandatory spindle tools. It's got a flat edge ground to a wider part in the center, so that gives you a little bit of clearance when you do your cut. And you use this kind of like you do the skew chisel when you're doing the peeling cuts. And so I'm going to turn a groove 1 inch in diameter at either end of this, and then I'll work from the center out with the spindle gouge, or maybe with the skew. Let's see. I'll try to use the skew. And the arm over top. Tool rest is a little high for the parting tool. Let it come down just a bit. So it's right on the center, comes straight in. So I learned that if you come right at a high angle, you start to get some tear out on the edges, because it starts that peel right away. If you introduce it straight in at the center, it acts like a scraper, and it'll cut the surface a little bit clean. Then you can raise the handle up and come in to keep it a little more clean. So, and so what did I do? I came over that high instead of straight, like I suggested. And depending on your comfort level, you can come around with your hand on the back, get the calipers, and they just go over pack. And I've rounded the tips on these guys so they're less likely to catch on the wood or burn the wood when you're working. Is that? All right, so now I'm gonna do that exaggerated bead starting at the center, working my way out to either end with the skew. Come up just a little bit again. It's pretty good on that side. Now stay away from the center, like I said, so keep that diameter intact. That's a pretty good surface right off of the tool, I think. And now we'll see if I can turn that bead in the other direction, the other side of the screw. Just so it's a little more awkward. They may look like it, but I'm really not putting much pressure. It's just how it's comfortable to hold the tool. I'm pretty relaxed with both hands. Deep down inside, I'm a little nervous, but my hands are kind of relaxed. So the center of that, I think, is still okay to see. And actually, that's not a great cut. I lied. It's got some grooves in there, so I'll try to hit that side one more time, and I'll probably bring the center down just a little bit, but at least I've avoided it for the most part to keep that diameter up, and then we can reduce it down. Well, there's some kind of spiral cuts on there. I'm gonna move them just so you guys can see them, because I don't care. I'm not sure why that's happening, but I need to work on that. I don't know if perhaps it's that secondary bevel I put on my skew chisel. I hadn't had that happen on any of the other ones, and I did those straight with the tool, so we'll see. All right, so the last two things I'm gonna do is clean up this little fillet. And I'll turn the bead on the other end. And similar to how I did in the middle, I'll mark the center of that bead so I don't take it down. Last cut, thermostatus, right? Happy with that? Call that good. Except now I got a big Sharpie mark type of my bead. Watch this. Do a curve instead. I don't practice these much, so this will go sideways in a minute. Oh. All right. What am I doing wrong? I think I got escape, and then it wants to keep going in there. So. Go back to my skew, just clean off that little track that I created for myself. And I'll just. I also cut, I created some torn grain up here when I did that peeling cut. All right, last step. Someone with the toe. Right, I'm gonna call that done for the turning part, and then just quickly to do a. Just want to burn those lines really fast if I can find my little piece of wire. It's around here somewhere. Where'd it go? Down here in my shavings. Oh, here it is. That was just. I got into wood turning because I used to do pottery a little bit. And then I had a kid and I lost access to the studio. And this seemed like the closest thing to getting some instant gratification at the end of the day of making something. And a lot of the principles apply. So this is a leftover piece of a wire tool for cutting blocks of clay. Sort of like piano wire, and actually works well for doing little burning details on stuff like this. If you haven't done this before, I thought you could just touch the wire to it and it would burn, and it will, but it takes longer. But the more surface area you get on the piece, the faster the wire heats up.
The wire gets low.
I can't feel it where I'm at on these sides. I think it cools pretty quickly. So I think if you were doing it right up next to it, you'd feel it. No, it's that part's definitely hot. So I'm gonna leave the ends on it because maybe I'll finish it later, or like I said, if somebody else wants to take it, finish it, have it for their own. I've got lots more black acacia, but I'll pass this around just so you can see up close kind of what it looked like. But that's a pattern now. About an hour? That's not too bad. Maybe a little longer.
Thank you, Kev. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Any questions about it? Yeah.
Right, 20 versus 11, 9, 9,
Almost got myself again. I'll pass it around so you can see it. So let's see, where's the camera right now? Up above, Dan? So this is a typical spur drive center. This is the one that comes with the lathe. I've got one like this at home. But it's got a fixed point on it. And if you're doing like bowls and things like that, and you want to use one of these to start roughing it out, you kind of got to pound it in with a mallet or something like that. Now you've got one. But the spring-loaded one makes it a little bit nice. You can get it on center and engage it without having to whack it in so bad. And these big spurs will grab the wood and turn it. But it also doesn't let it slip. Whereas, this one doesn't have those spur drives. And it's just a friction there. So if you do get a nasty catch, it'll spin on the drive center instead of biting in and getting a sort of a violent catch like you would otherwise. So I'll hand these to you so you can see them. This is about $55, I think, or something like that.
What is the name of it again?
It's the One Way is the brand, and I think they call it a safety center. It doesn't have a clutch. I cut myself again. Yeah.
Yeah, you were questioning why this has a taper to it.
Oh, the mallet, yeah.
Yeah, and it was explained to me by a wood carver many years ago, an old school wood carver, that if you can imagine that this thing is swinging, is a fulcrum down there somewhere, probably around here or so. In order to deliver completely even pressure, this thing has to be tapered, so it's like part of a pie slice that is centered on that fulcrum. If you do that, then the pressure you put on that is even.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have it, if it's just a cylinder, you can't accomplish that.
Is there a certain degree that they recommend, or does they taper it?
Depending on your height, I bet.
I don't, you can probably figure, just, take some pictures of, and I figure out where that center would be,
Yeah, and for comparison, I didn't mention this earlier, but I was traveling to visit family and I found this in an antique shop for like $15, and it's a nice heavy mallet. But the nice thing about the round ones is it doesn't matter which way you hold it. This one you got to keep it facing the thing that you're hitting, but this one you pick it up and go, and you're always hitting a surface that's good for the work that you're doing.
My guess is that the arc is your shoulder joint. So if you figure out what that distance is, then you can figure out the pie shape or the slice of a pie that centers on your shoulder.
Except when you're holding them out like this, not in line with.
Well, but the rotation occurs there.
Okay, sure.
So my thinking is that if you really want to customize it, you would have to measure the person's distance from here to there.
I don't think it takes much. I think just a little bit kind of makes it better. And getting it exactly right is probably not critical, so. You gonna make one of those for everybody, Wally? Okay.
Who wants to see this? I thought there was a clutch in.
No, there's no clutch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the videos I was watching was describing, before there were live centers, there were cup centers, and they would fill them with like tallow or some other kind of fat. And as the wood turned, it would create friction and heat, and it would, liquidize the fat, which would provide the lubricant for the end that wasn't being driven. So I thought that was interesting. If not with questions, I'll call it good on that. John, did you have anything?
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.